Today I'm going to talk about something a little bit different, how to paint a rainbow. Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Rainbow is a beautiful natural phenomenon. We have been seeing rainbows quite a bit lately because we got some short rains followed by the sun. I usually avoid painting something like a rainbow because it's too pretty to capture in a painting and it can make a painting look a little bit too dreamy and too sweet, if you know what I mean. But then I came across this scenery the other day when I was outside. This is an asphalt plane. I really like the juxtaposition of a beautiful and dreamy rainbow behind this rugged looking asphalt plane, so I decided to paint this scene. I've never painted a rainbow before, so needless to say, I failed a few times. I learned from my mistakes, and today I want to share with you how I did it. How to paint a natural looking rainbow that doesn't look like candy, but the light that belongs to the sky. So I'm going to give you a quick demo on how I paint the rainbow. After that, I will share my process of this painting. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so let's try to do a little bit of rainbow. This is more going to be like an exercise than doing a real painting. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the context of the rainbow. So usually I'm not going to paint the rainbow by itself against the white background, otherwise it'll be actually a lot easier. It's usually in the sky. So it depends on the type of the sky you are painting. So in my case, it's usually against some darker clouds and things like that, because usually the raining sky of a dark cloud where the light is hitting, that's where you get the rainbow. So what I'm going to do right now is just trying to get that in the context. So I will wet the paper a little bit. This is a back side of a paper, so I'm using what I already have. So I'm just gonna wet the paper. You can use a sponge, but I found using a flat brush just as good. Okay, so get that paper nice and wet, nice and moist. So it will be a little bit easier, also give us just a little bit more time. And I'll be using a slightly bigger brush. This is a number 14 Escoda Ultimo synthetic squirrel brush. So I'm just going to grab my three primaries. So this is cadmium red medium hue to be exact. I don't think Daniel Smith make any more pure cadmium anymore because it's toxic. And this is cadmium yellow medium. I will add just a little bit of Hansa yellows just to make it a little bit warmer. That's just the yellow that I like to use. And I will also use cobalt blue. So we got our three primary, the red, yellow, and blue. And on the side here, I'm going to mix a sort of a gray color. So cobalt blue with a bit of burnt umber to get that neutral gray. Okay, I'll add a little bit of cerulean blue actually just to offset that grayness a little bit. Okay, so now that the paper is nice and damp, I'm gonna start by just painting the sky and the rainbow. I'm actually gonna mix a little bit more mixtures. Always try to mix a bigger pile than you think you need. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a nice sky here. Okay, so this is where the rainbow is going to be. Okay, I'm gonna clean my brush, dried it a little bit, and grab my red color, just a little bit more. Here's my red here, and I'm just going to go over it like that, overlap it a little bit. Okay, and clean my brush, dry it. Okay, make sure it's clean and dry a little bit. And now I'm gonna get my yellow to it. Now the paper is still a little bit damp, but which is great. But check it out. Okay, I'm going to just paint and overlap that red there. Okay, paint and overlap that red there. So what's going to happen is it's going to mix the color in between. You get a little bit of that orange there. Okay, clean my brush, grab my blue color, and same thing. Okay, I'm going to paint and overlap. Okay, so this way you get totally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You get actually get 5 colors. Okay. And to me, that's enough to convey that is a rainbow. Okay, so if we just mix a little bit more of this kind of sky color underneath here, again, we'll just overlap it just a little bit and we'll just wrap it up. Chances are that rainbow is going to end somewhere. It's not going to just end in the middle of the air. Usually it's end, soften somewhere and things like that. Okay, and there you got your rainbow. Now this is a huge rainbow. There's kind of like a rainbow without context. So usually there's going to be maybe some dark clouds, some stuff, but the point is that you do your rainbow kind of wet on wet like these, and you don't need it very, very strong. You don't need it very saturated because it's gonna look a little bit too sweet, a little bit too dreamy, almost kind of candy-like. Rainbow as a visual element is a very colorful scene. So if you just want it to be, in my case, I just want it to be part of the background, okay, then I definitely don't want to make it too strong. So I'm just gonna do a little bit of wet onto wet, get a little bit of a dark cloud in. Okay. I'm just gonna wrap it up like that. Okay, underneath then I can start to paint some mountains and whatever things here and there. Okay, but that's pretty much how you do rainbow. Just do it in one go. And now is the part that you hands off. Okay, if you don't like how it looks, still don't touch it. Okay, if you think you want to add more color and stuff, don't do it. Okay, this is the part that the wash is starting to dry. Okay, unless you make your mixture really, really dry, then it's not going to have that nice and soft, fresh look. This is a part that you don't want to keep going back to this part. You can paint some clouds on the side if it's still wet, you're still allowed to do that. But for the part of the rainbow, you probably don't want to do that. Okay, and right now, this looks good. Okay, for what it is. But if you think it's actually too saturated against the background, you can actually wait it to be dry and do a glaze on top. Again, depends on what you want. So I'm going to blow this dry and I will do a glaze on top just to show you the effect. Okay, this should be nice and dry now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a very quick glaze over the top just to show you the effect. So if you find the rainbow still a little bit too saturated, you can glaze over it. Maybe with like, I'm just gonna glaze over mostly with cerulean blue. Tiny touch of burnt umber. Okay, so this is a nice kind of grayish blue, and I'm just gonna, lightly just paint it over the top of it. Okay. Now it dulls down quite a bit. So instead of something really pops out, it feels it's sitting back into the background a lot more. Okay, so it really depends on the effect that you're looking for. If you want something really saturated, then don't glaze over it. But in my painting, which I'm going to show you a little bit later, I actually wanted to sit back a little bit to be kind of like a secondary read. So I glaze over top just lightly. And now you can start to add a little bit of different elements into it. So I'm just going to... Okay, so hope this is helpful for you. This is just a nice and quick demo. So the key to paint a rainbow is to keep it simple. Use just the 3 primaries and paint the edges wet onto wet so you can get some soft edges, and glaze it if it is too saturated. Okay, I am now going to share with you the process of this painting and see the rainbow in context. Before we start, if you like my video and content, please give it a like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you won't miss out on my next video. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so let's take a look at this painting. So I start this painting by doing just a rough sketch of the upper portion of the painting, which is the sky and the top part of the buildings. This is actually the 4th attempt that I did. The first 2 attempts I actually did a full-on drawing, finished drawing. Then when I start to paint the sky, the rainbow didn't work out that well and I have to scratch the whole painting and start over again. So after the 3rd attempt, I started to just do the rough sketch for the upper part of the painting. That way I can quickly go into the first wash, see if it works out. If it works out, then I will finish the rest of the drawing. So very quickly, I start to work out the color that I need for the rainbow first, just like the short demo that I did earlier. So the 3 primary colors, and I mix a color for the sky. My palette is already dirty because I have tried a few times already. So this is a real story for me that I failed a couple times as well. Anyway, so start off with the red color and I overlap it with the yellow, and then comes the blue color. And as they blend into each other, I get the secondary colors and I quickly go over the sky and connect the shape. Of course, I try to paint around some of the highlight areas that I'm going to do, but right now I'm just really trying to focusing on the sky and the rainbow. So at this point, I think the rainbow's working out pretty well. So I started to paint some other colors and so on. So this is still the first wash, so I'm just painting the color of the light. But after a few failed attempts and see this one working out, it was actually a very exciting moment for me and I actually feel quite relieved. So here I erase some of the dirty line and starting to do the drawings for real. The drawing is actually a little bit complicated and I have to eyeball a lot because even though these are all man-made structure and they should have certain degree of perspective involved, they are all kind of facing in different directions. So there's a lot of eyeballing here. And as I do the drawing, I also think about how am I going to connect some of the shape as well. This one I actually didn't do a value study, so I have to think about that while I'm doing the drawing. I wanted to paint this scenery simply because I really find it interesting and I think the lighting and the background rainbow look really beautiful. But I actually didn't realize how difficult it's actually going to be. And funny enough, the most difficult thing for me is actually the rainbows in the background, not all the man-made structures, not the truck, not the buildings and all the man-made structures. Because I do believe I have a decent understanding of the basic structure and the perspective, so drawing those man-made structures are actually not that difficult for me. The rainbows in the background is far more difficult simply because I am looking to get that really subtle, really natural looking rainbows in the background like the one in the photo, and they need to be nice and soft and clean, and those are going to be completely rely on how I handle the watercolor medium. So that actually tells me that I still need more practice when it comes to playing with the watercolor. Anyway, so I finished the drawing now, and the background is completely dry, so I am pre-wetting some of the areas that I'm going to paint the first wash light. So right now what I'm doing is just continuing the first wash. I already did the sky and the rainbow. So now I'm going to continue to paint the light value. So the light part of the building, those are lit by the sun. They are not exactly white, but more like a warm beige color. So we need to get that in. And the reason I pre-wet those areas because I want them to bleed out a little bit. I want those to be soft shapes. I can always cover them and fix their shape later on when I'm painting a darker value. So I'm also painting that red barrel in the front. This painting actually got some primary colors. We got this red barrel and we got the yellow piping and the yellow paint on the curb side. We also got the blue truck on the right. So since the background is pretty much dry, I actually want to darken the sky just a little bit as well as glaze over that rainbow so it doesn't look as saturated. Because again, if you look at the photo, the rainbow is actually quite subtle. So doing a glazing on top actually makes the rainbow muted a little bit more. And that actually blends in better into the sky. So at this stage, I'm starting to think about what do I do next. So I pre-wet some of the areas and I start to mix a thicker mixture for the trees in the background. I don't want those trees to be really harsh, so that's why I pre-wet the surface a little bit. You get a little bit of soft edges, but still controlled. So those are just the background. Some of the trees are a little bit darker and I'll paint over them a little bit later. So here I start to paint the secondary value, which is the middle value. So I start with the top of the asphalt plank and I will work my way down to the ground. So this painting, the process of it actually is a little bit random, I should say. It's a little bit all over the place because the first wash sort of break apart into two parts, the sky and then other light colors. And now I'm trying to show the form of the structures. So I start to paint that asphalt plank, the two big cylinders on the top, and I start to give it a little bit of the soft edges just so that it will have a transition from dark to light, and I'll connect them down. The shape connection in this picture is actually not that obvious to me, but at the same time I didn't do a value study as well, so this is me trying to figure that part out while I'm painting. But right now I'm trying to stick to the middle value, so wherever I see middle value I will paint them in first. So this truck casting a shadow on the wall of the buildings on the left, and I try to paint around the yellow poles and then continue to connect that shape to the background building. Again, since I didn't do a value study for this one, I am taking my time to really study the source material and try to draw out a plan in my mind. So while I'm still staying at the middle value, I also need to identify them as I paint. So that is why I start to recommend doing value study for my students, not just because it is a very useful exercise to study values, but it does give you a very nice plan going forward before you are doing the color painting. So here I am painting the blue truck. So the brush I'm using right now is Escoda Perla. It's a synthetic nylon brush. This is great for painting the hard surfaces. So after that, I paint the asphalt to the left, trying to continue connect the shape as much as possible. And I connect that to the tree and as well as the ground surface. The ground surface is middle value as well. So I try to connect the shape as much as possible. I switch to a bigger brush so I can get a little bit more paint loaded on my brush, so that would be easier for me to paint the big wash. the big middle value wash. So I try to paint around a little bit to preserve a little bit of the light. Those will be the puddles of water. It did just rain, so there are some puddle of waters on the ground. So especially near the foreground, that puddle of water is really important. I also need to paint the reflection of the asphalt planks. I pre-wet it with clean water and I do a little bit of wet onto wet so you got some nice soft reflections. I start to add a little bit more middle values to intensify the yellow color because they did fade off quite a bit. So lastly, I need to paint the middle value for that pipe looking scene on top of the building. I don't know what's it called, but I do know it's kind of like a bent cylinder. So I need to get that shape and that transition from light to dark going. So now that we start to read a little bit more form there. So now I'm painting my third layer, which is the dark value. So I was hoping that by adding some dark values, the structure is going to read a lot better. And as we complete the value range, the painting is going to look more finished. So I also paint some darker trees in the backgrounds. The evergreen tree is actually quite dark. Their local colors are actually much darker than most of the other trees. So even they are lit by the sun, some of them are still quite dark. So again, we're trying to connect the shape as much as possible as well. So I connect the dark from the background to the foreground. And now I'm trying to connect that really dark asphalt pile there. Really make sure you have enough mixture so that it looks nice and clean. And connect the shadow to the side of the red barrel. And also try to add a little bit more red to it so it looks more saturated. One thing you need to know is that whenever sun hits a surface, it intensifies the color because sun is so bright. So if the object is already a saturated color, if it's hit by the sun, all that color is going to bounce right back at your eye. So that's why during a sunny day, everything outside looks more colorful. It's because the intensity of sun really enhances all the colors that you see. Painting the dark in the structure in the middle. Adding a little bit more detail, some contact shadows, a little bit of seams here and there. And by painting the dark right next to those yellow poles, that makes those poles a lot brighter and the color pops out more. So now you can already start seeing some of the forms starting to pop a little bit more, and some of the structure reads a lot better just by adding that dark. So when there's light, middle value, and dark, when you complete the value range, things just looks a lot more complete. Even though the painting overall still looks quite loose, I try to keep the shape simple and easy to read. But by having the right value in the right place, things start to look better. Sorry about the jump, so I forgot to record that part. But what I basically did is I paint the dark, I finished the dark area, and I did a glaze on the ground. So the ground looks a little bit darker. That makes the water puddles a lot lighter, and it helps to differentiate the different surfaces. And now I'm just trying to wrap up the painting by adding a little bit more details here and there, mostly dark values. And now I'm trying to paint back some of the lights with white gouache because there are some thin bars and some light areas here and there that is simply too hard to paint around. So I use white gouache to finish the job. Here is the finished painting. I really like how it turns out, and even though there's a lot of frustrations when I starting to paint the rainbow, but I was really glad that I finished this one with a decent result. This is an important painting to me because I now know that I am capable of painting something a little bit different, something new, and that's very exciting as an artist. I hope I can share more new things with you this year. That's it for this week's video. I hope you enjoy it. If you haven't, please visit my website at cafewatercolor.com. Sign up to get my Fast Track Watercolor PDF guide and exclusive videos that's not on YouTube. I am Eric from Cafe Watercolor. See you next time.